Hello, this is wmpyr. Really excited to do this video for you guys. This is basically my fight analysis for self-defense, but this is an MMA sport match that I'm going to use and try to get some lessons out for you guys to study, and also myself included. Alright, so the match that we're talking about is from Pride FC, which is one of my favorite organizations from back in the day. No longer exists, but back then, I have to say, I was a bigger Pride fan than I was the UFC. And man, they had some spectacular, great matches and some really interesting matches to study. So this one is Pride 6. It is Naoya Ogawa versus Gary Goodridge. So before I get into the actual fight and analyze that, let's actually focus on the fighters' backstories real quick. So Gary Goodridge, I think it was after this match that he got the nickname the Gatekeeper of Pride, meaning basically if you're able to beat Gary Goodridge, then you get to join the roster. Then you have earned yourself a place in Pride, and you could become part of the normal competition. But until then, you are untested, because that's what Pride did. They had some really high-level competition, but at the same time, they also had the spectacle aspect. And with the spectacle aspect, they had some untested dudes. Just if your resume looked interesting, they wanted you in, So there were some tomato cans in there that you knew they were going to lose, but they still made for an interesting match. And at the end of the day, like I said, Pride, they did half of it was very high-level sport competition, but the other half was definitely spectacle, and it was to entertain the fans and stuff. So that's why I think it was a good thing that they had someone like Gary Goodridge to, basically, this is your real test right here. Okay, so let's move on to Naoya Ogawa. Ogawa was a Olympic judo athlete. He was an Olympian for Japan, and he was a silver medalist in the Barcelona Olympics. The guy is really large for a Japanese fighter, and so he had that physical capability there. And after his Olympic days, he went into professional wrestling, and he became a champion there under the tutelage of Antonio Inoki. He was pretty much seen as the protege of Antonio Inoki. Antonio Inoki and Giant Baba, these two guys are the two biggest names in Japanese professional wrestling. They each one had their own organizations, and Antonio Inoki eventually broke off and started doing his own thing, and then this is when he had his own protege, Ogawa. And like I said, Ogawa was a professional wrestling champion at the time, I believe, and then this was his MMA debut. This may seem a little strange, but in Japan, let's see, in Japan, the public perception of professional wrestlers for a long time had been that they are the #1 when it came to martial arts fighting. Because Japan had a long history of various types of martial arts styles, and there was a lot of challenge matches between them. A lot of people fought each other, a lot of different style versus style type thing. Judo versus jiu-jitsu had a long heated rivalry. Throw karate into the mix there. But then ultimately, because of a few very famous matches historically, I think professional wrestlers were considered the best for a long time in Japan, even though other styles were still respected, okay? But professional wrestling was considered the best. Up until the UFC made its debut in the States, and then Japan became very interested in that and started doing their own UFC type of events like Vale Tudo Japan and stuff like that. And they started bringing in Brazilian fighters, Rickson Gracie and stuff. And when they started doing that, the public had a rude awakening over there in Japan and realized that professional wrestlers were no longer the best, that the MMA guys were the best fighters of the time. So that big old change was happening in Japan, and that was a huge upset. In the US, it was, I think the perception when the UFC first came out, it was like, wow, it wasn't so much like there was one style considered the best. It was more like, wow, groundwork is effective. That's what the Gracies kind of brought in, and it's like, oh wow, groundwork is is very, very effective. So that was the perception here in the U.S. In Japan, like I said, it was, what, professional wrestlers aren't the best fighters? So that was completely different kind of point of view, you know. So anyway, to give you an idea of Ogawa's popularity, it would be the equivalent of right when the Ultimate Warrior defeated Hulk Hogan. So the torch was passed and they wanted him to be the new champion, but it didn't work out. Well, anyway, right when Ultimate Warrior got the belt, imagine he went into the UFC. That's what this is like, this match. That's what this match is like. So the population is very, very excited. They understood that, you know, pretty much a professional wrestler was not going to be better at fighting than an MMA fighter. However, the fans still romanticized and still wanted to see a professional wrestler do well. But then, you know, they understood that this guy is not going to be like Sakuraba, who was an exception, an anomaly, and he was a professional wrestler that, you know, was doing great in MMA, and they called him pretty much the messiah of professional wrestling over there. So anyway, this was his first debut into MMA. And man, what a test it was. The first 15 seconds of the match, to me, is the most important part of this entire video. For those of you, you want to take a lesson out of this and learn how to defend yourself on the street. Chances are, on the street, the guy that's going to try to fight you, attack you, is going to be larger than you, more aggressive, strong, and angry. You know, they're going to have a physical advantage over you. And I would think that in this match, the first 15 seconds where Ogawa is just getting hammered, and I mean, he is just covering up and just all over the place, running for dear life, trying to survive. That's pretty much how I would expect a street fight to go. If I was, you know, some dude wanted to brawl and fight me and something like that, that's pretty much what I'm expecting. You got to know to just cover up and survive. If you watch this match, you're going to see that. And just because you're doing that in a street fight, 15 seconds right there, the guy's just brawling and boom and throwing these big old shots and everything, and you're getting, you know, roughed up and all that, but as long as you don't get knocked out, and then that might be it. In the actual street, it might end right there. Okay, by that time people come in, break you guys up, or who knows, it might end right there. But if you watch this match, after the 15 seconds, then Ogawa is able to successfully clinch the guy, take down Goodridge, and then for the rest of the first round, he just puts on a beating on the guy. You see that even though Ogawa's specialty, I believe, in judo was the throws and stuff, but because he is the real deal, he is a real judo Olympian athlete, which is a tremendous thing, even though all the other ground stuff, the submissions, the positions, the transitions, all that is not his specialty. He can still do it, and he can still outclass, you know, the average MMA fighter. So that's impressive. That's what exactly you're going to see, and he does that for the entire first round. And then in the second round, fairly early on, he's able to finally get a submission. But it's pretty much, I believe, because he put a beating on Goodridge, and also because Goodridge probably spent a lot of energy trying to knock him out in the first 15 seconds. You know, so I think that's what happened there. But so that goes to show you that what you see in the actual, probably in a street fight where a guy's like throwing bombs and stuff like that, and if you're, I don't want to say used to it, but if you know that the match isn't going to end there and you're not overwhelmed, even though you're getting slugged out and you're just covering up like a ball and you're cowering up and you're running for dear life, it looks like you're just getting your ass kicked. That's not the end of the match. And then from there, Ogawa, who is, like I said, the 15 seconds of just brutally getting pummeled, he sees an opening and he's able to throw a punch, and it's not a good punch. It looked like a straight punch, and it looked like just out of desperation where he saw an opening and he just went bam like that, and he just took advantage of it. So it wasn't a full, you know, putting in his body and everything, but it's enough to cause Goodridge to nosebleed. What I'm trying to say is, even though you're getting overwhelmed in a street fight, I think that's what's going to happen. People a lot of times get overwhelmed. They self-defeat themselves because it's intense. It's really, really intense, and they're not used to that kind of intensity, and they want to give up or whatever. In this match, you see Ogawa doesn't give up. and he has to continue on, and because of it, he wins the match. All right. In a street fight, you may never get to do all that. You may not get 10 minutes of just, you know, taking the guy down who's bigger and stronger than you and then just working the position and pummeling the guy. You may not have that luxury. The cops are going to show up. You know, there's going to be bystanders. You know, you may not get that kind of luxury. But the important part is to survive the intensity and to not give up. And the only way to get used to that kind of thing is you have to experience it. You have to experience the sparring, and you have to experience really, really hard pressure and stress, and to not let that overwhelm you, you know. And watch this match. Watch this match and watch the first 15 seconds. If that's all you saw, you would say, like, he lost. He got his ass kicked. That's what you would think. But then you watch the rest of the match, and that's not true. So it ain't over there, you know. It's not over until the fat lady sings, okay? So, but at the end of the day, on the street, it doesn't matter if you submit the guy, if you finish the guy. None of that matters. Survival is priority. So if you're able to not get knocked out, then that's a victory, my friends. So anyway, thank you for listening, and take care, folks.